Izraelska zatvorska služba priprema smrtne kazne za palestinske zatvorenike, gradi takozvanu zelenu milju, dok Ujedinjene nacije organizacije za ljudska prava upozoravaju na kršenje prava i međunarodnog prava. Oko 9.000 Palestinaca je u izraelskim zatvorima, polovina bez optužnice, javlja to Amnesty International. Gotovo 1400 Palestinaca ubijeno je dok su pokušavali doći do hrane u Gazi putem Gaza humanitarne fondacije. UN traži nezavisne istrage i poštivanje međunarodnog humanitarnog prava. A mi večeras donosimo ispovijest američkog vojnika o palestinskom dječaku Amiru, 10-godišnjaku, koji je prema njegovim navodima ubijen odmah nakon što je primio pomoć ove fondacije. Iako demantovan od strane izraelskih medija, ovaj vojnik ostaje pri svom svjedočanstvu. A radi se o ispovijesti penzionisanog američkog vojnog oficira Antonija Aguilara, koji je prošle godine boravio upravo u Gazi, opisao masovnu glad, neselektivna ubijanja i neuspjehe američke finansirane pomoći, izazivajući kritike rukovodstva same fondacije. On je moj gost večeras. Ja sam Mika Ferrer-Gotić, ovo je Puls Planete. Izraelska zatvorska služba započela je pripreme za moguću primjenu smrtne kazne nad palestinskim zatvorenicima. Objavili su to izraelski mediji. Prema navodima vlade Izraela, prenosi kanal 13, gradi se posebni objekt nazvan Izraelska zelena milja. Predviđen je za izvršavanje masovnih vješanja, dok su u toku obuke i proceduralne pripreme. Prijedlog zakona prošle godine je prošao čitanje u Knesetu. Organizacije za ljudska prava, ali i stručnjaci UN-a oštro su kritikovali ovu inicijativu, upozoravajući da bi obavezne smrtne presude kršile pravo na život i predstavljaju ozbiljno kršenje međunarodnog prava. Podsjećamo da izvještaji organizacije Amnesty International pokazuju da su se u izraelskim zatvorima, da se dalje nalazi više od 9.000 Palestinaca. Otprilike polovina njih drži se bez suđenja ili bilo kakve optužnice. A gotovo 1400 Palestinaca, civila, ubijeno je dok su pokušavali doći do hrane u Gazi. U distribuciji kontroverzne GHF organizacije od kraja maja do decembra prošle godine upozorio je to Ured UN-a za ljudska prava. Samo između 30. i 31. jula ubijeno je 105 ljudi, a stotine su ranjene. Ujedinjene nacije navode da većina žrtve su izgladnjeli civili koji su namamljeni u distributivne centre te pozivaju na nezavisne istrage i poštivanje međunarodnog humanitarnog prava. Jedan od njih je i Amir, koji je ubijen odmah nakon što je primio humanitarnu pomoć u Gazi. Amir, dječak od oko 10 ili 12 godina, prešao je 12 kilometara do punkta Gaza humanitarne fondacije, bos i očan za hranom. Susret ovog dječaka i američkog vojnika Antonija Aguilara zabilježen je upravo na jednom od punktova. Kada je napokon dobio malu porciju pomoći, Aguilar je ispričao medijima u Sjedinjenim državama kako je dječak uzeo njegovu ruku, poljubio je i rekao šukran, što znači hvala na arapskom. Međutim, trenutak humanosti prekinut je kada su izraelske snage otvorile vatru, bacale suzavac, šok bombe među okupljene. Amir je ubijen. Aguilar opisuje da su Palestinci, uključujući Amira, bili obični civili, bez ikakve veze sa sukobom, koji su samo pokušavali preživjeti. Njegova smrt simbolizira katastrofu koja je nastala od 27. maja do kraja novembra, kada je GHF preuzeo distribuciju hrane, a više od 1400 Palestinaca ubijeno je dok su tražili pomoć. Penzionisani potpukovnik američke vojske Anthony Aguilar, diplomirani sa West Pointa, odlikovani pripadnik zelenih beretki sa 25 godina službe, uključujući 12 tura kako u Iraku, Afganistanu, tako i šire, postao je zviždač prošle godine nakon što je svjedočio izraelskim nasumičnim napadima na civile u Gazi. Angažovan od strane Gaza humanitarne fondacije za osiguravanje podjele pomoći, Aguilar je opisao razaranje pucnjave IDF-a na nenaoružane civile, uključujući djecu te neuspjehe pomoći finansirane iz Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, koji su mjesta distribucije pretvorili, kako ih on naziva, zamke smrti. U svom javnom svjedočenju pred Kongresom detaljno je opisao masovnu glad, neselektivna ubijanja, kršenje ženevskih konvencija, izazivajući reakcije, pokušaje diskreditacije od samog rukovodstva upravo ove kontroverzne fondacije. Now, in 2026, Aguilar channels his outrage into politics, running as a Green Party candidate for North Carolina's 13th congressional district, vowing to end U.S. complicity in endless wars and prioritize domestic needs like universal health care and a living wage. Anthony Aguilar is joining me from North Carolina. Anthony, welcome to the program and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure. We have so much to discuss. But let's take it from the beginning. When you were in Gaza, what exactly were you told about the mission to Gaza, the aid distribution, and the security situation before you even went in? And what was the reality on the ground once you actually got there?
When I was recruited by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in May of 2025, I was specifically recruited because of my background in Army Special Operations. I had recently retired. And I was told that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, through UG Solutions, which is a private security contract, would be taking on the entire role of the United Nations relief efforts in Gaza particularly, and that we would be delivering to all of the aid sites. We would be delivering the aid that was needed, and that we would be doing it unilaterally, meaning we wouldn't be under the control of the IDF. We would be doing it independently and unilaterally. Of course, we would coordinate with the IDF for security purposes because of operations, but we would be doing it in a unilateral way as humanitarian aid should be done. And we were also told that based on the security environment in Gaza, that we would be under constant attack, that Hamas would be attacking us every day, that every Palestinian was to be considered a threat, and that we would be going into a very high-risk environment to deliver this aid. And that's why they had specifically recruited former military, former special operations to work on this contract. And when I got to Gaza, I soon realized that we were not operating independently or unilaterally, that we were under the total control and direction of the IDF through the IDF unit called the Coordinating Office for the Governance Activities in the Territories. It's called COGAT. They run everything in the occupied territory of Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank. And it also became clear to me that we were not there to provide humanitarian aid. We were there as a complementary operation to the IDF offensive operations. The role of the GHF was not to provide independent and fulfillment of aid. It was to provide death traps, to man death traps, to use food as bait to force Palestinians to make the choice of do they stay in their homes and starve to death because there's no food, there's no water, or do they make the risky journey to these aid distribution sites for the promise of food? And when they get to these aid distribution sites, their homes were destroyed by offensive operations. And if they survived the journey to the sites, they were then not allowed to go home. The images that you see of Palestinians that are being displaced, such as the video that's being shown right now, those are Palestinians who came to these distribution sites who then could not go home because their homes were either destroyed or the Israeli military shut off the corridor, like that picture right there of the Morag corridor in the south, and the Palestinians that came to get food couldn't go home. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was operating as a part of this, fully aware, fully knowing, fully cooperating with this plan to forcefully displace, to provide minimal, and when I say minimal, I mean not even enough of the minimal amount of food, no water, no medical supplies, no vaccines, baby formula, anything that would be needed to get them through the winter conditions, simply just dried food goods with no water, no means to cook it, and under the risk of being shot or killed as they came to these distribution sites. And once they got there, they would never go home. And that was the truth of what was happening. And the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and UG Solutions were not only complicit in it, they were fully aware of it in planning before we even began operations. So we were lied to and we were deceived, and I saw the truth of it, and I could not tolerate it.
How long, Anthony, how long did it take you to say, hey, this is not what we were told when we were told to come in and distribute food? This doesn't look like a humanitarian mission. How long did it take you when you were on the ground on that very site? Did it take you to say, something's off here?
So I first went into Gaza on the 24th of May. When we first got to Israel, there were a period of days where we were preparing, coordinating with the Israeli military, which I thought was simply coordination, because there were certain routes that had to be used. There were operations ongoing, so we had to coordinate. And in that time, in those 2 short days, I realized that we weren't coordinating with the Israeli military. We were being told what to do. So that kind of initially gave me kind of a concern as to, is this how operations are going to be conducted? Because this is not how this should be done. On the 24th of May, when we actually went into Gaza, and I saw that the distribution sites had already been built and they had already been in place with no input at all from Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or from us that would be conducting operations. They'd already been built, and they'd been built and located in places that were under current combat operations. So these were not safe areas. These were very dangerous areas. So that was another kind of an indicator to me that is this incompetence? Is this the, just kind of getting started and we're trying to figure things out? So that's what I took it as. Okay, we got to fix this. We got to move the location of the sites. We have to detach ourselves from being under the control of the Israeli military. We have to conduct our own operations. And I realized day after day that wasn't happening, that we were simply becoming under more control of the IDF. And the sites were not only going to stay where they were going to become more and more used as death traps to bring in more and more Palestinians to these sites from the north to the south, which, if you think about humanitarian aid, why would you put aid distribution sites tens of kilometers away from the vulnerable and at-risk population that needs that aid, other than to forcefully displace them from where they are? So as these things became clear to me, I started to take a lot of notes, and I started to ask a lot of questions. And in asking those questions, it kind of, I thought that, in asking these questions that we would fix things. And it soon came to my belief that in asking those questions, I was soon becoming a target. And when it became very, very clear to me without a shadow of a doubt was on the 10th of June, while I was in Gaza that morning. I came out of Gaza to the operation site, and we had an overrun at one of the distribution sites, and there were 3 children that were at risk for being trampled to death. And a Palestinian man picked these children up to put them onto a berm at the site so they weren't crushed in the stampede. And the Israeli officer who was in the operations center with us in Kerem Shalom ordered his snipers to shoot these children off of that berm. And I intervened, and I stepped in, and I said, no, you're not doing that. You're not going to do that. And in the course of this exchange of he and I disagreeing on this, the children jumped off the berm, and they had run back into the rubble. So they ultimately were not shot by these snipers, but the order was given. So after that incident, I talked with the senior operations officer that was on the ground there representing GHF and UG Solutions. And I said to him, we cannot tolerate being involved in this type of war criminal activity. This shooting unarmed children is a war crime. We cannot be involved in this. And I was told directly to my face by this individual who was in charge, you don't question the client. Never question the IDF. We work for them. They're in charge. We do what they tell us to do. Whatever they do as a military is on them. We're here as a private contract. They're our client. We do what they say. And that completely broke the paradigm for me, because that's not what we were told. That's not what we were told in being there. So at that point, I resigned in protest. And it just so happened that the very next day, I resigned on the 10th, provided my paperwork on the 11th, was doing my last day on the 12th. And then that afternoon, late afternoon, the Iran-Israel war, 12-day war started. So then I was stuck in Israel and could not leave, and was subject to aerial bombardment every day in Beersheba until I was able finally to leave on the 26th of June.
26th of June. So you spent quite some time there. I want to take you back to the aid distribution. I want to talk about the little boy that you encountered at the aid distribution point. His name is Amir. He was between 10 and 12 years old, as you said. You shared some photos with the public, and you shared some photos with me as well. What happened with the boy?
So that was early in the operations conducted in Gaza with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We started operations on the 26th. On the 27th, we did not conduct operations because we had to rebuild part of the site because of the 34,000 Palestinians that came to the site that day. And then on the 28th, we began distribution again. And this was at site number 3, which was, so all 3 of the distribution sites in the south were in Rafah. One was in Tal al-Sultan, one was in Abu Bakr, and one was in the southern part of Khan Younisu. And so site number 3 was that southern Khan Younisu site just along the Marag corridor. So the Palestinians that had come to the site that day, in order to reach that site, because they had to travel from Khan Younisu all the way to the west along the coastal corridor, along the Mediterranean, and then all the way to the Marag corridor back east. They traveled, anywhere from 10 to 12 kilometers one way on foot. And as you can see, this young boy, Amir, he has no shoes. He was emaciated, obviously hadn't eaten in a while, very dehydrated. His skin was very dry. His fingernails were cracking. Obviously was in a state of distress from lack of food and care. And while we were on the site that day, I was standing further back from the crowd. The Palestinians, when they came to these sites, they would go through the boxes and the piles of aid, and then they would leave. And we tried to maintain a distance so that we weren't interfering with that, but that we also weren't presenting a threat or interfering. So I was standing back with another contractor. And as you can see in that picture, that's my hand that's reaching out to him there. That's me looking at him. And so he was in the crowd, and he walked over to us. You can see behind him where the majority of the crowd is. So he walked over to us, about 20 meters and extended his hand. And when I was first looking at him, one of the other contractors and I that were looking at him, we thought, like, is he hurt? Is he lost? Is he going to ask for more food? Because we didn't have any more food. And he walked all the way over there to us and extended his hand, not to ask for food, not to complain, not to ask for help, but to thank us, to say thank you. And you can see this young little boy, what he has in his arms. He doesn't have a box of food or a meal or water. He has parts of packages of food that he picked up off the ground. And his father was killed in an airstrike. He was separated from his mother during an evacuation. He had no one in his life that was part of his family. He was an orphan. He was out there living alone in a war. And here he came to this distribution site, and you look at this young child and you think, these are the Palestinians that are truly suffering from this. This young boy is not Hamas. This young boy is not a terrorist. This young boy had nothing to do with October 7th. And yet these are the ones that are suffering the most, targeted by food as a weapon and aerial bombardment. So this young boy, as he left the site that day, shortly thereafter, when he and I had spoke, the IDF at the location told us on the radio, all the Palestinians need to get off the site, get off the site. And so I had said to him, I was like, you need to go home, go home. And as he left with the remaining group of Palestinians at the exit going back towards the north, towards the military corridor, where the IDF had a tank station there. And the IDF had already started using the tank, the machine gun on the tank, to shoot at the crowd. And there's video of this that shows the crowd being fired upon at that intersection. And Amir was amongst those that was gunned down and killed in that crowd, amongst dozens. And
Anthony, I'm asking you this.
You
witnessed that. How do you respond to Israeli media accusations that you fabricated his death and you fabricated his story? There was a lot of media and public comments on this encounter of yours with Amir. What really happened? You saw him leaving the site, right?
That young boy was killed by the IDF, as many young children. Now, what's important about the IDF's response in that calling me a liar in September of 2005, September 4th, is when the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the IDF released this story that, oh, Amir is alive. Look, we found him. Well, the truth of that is, if you go back, when I first told this story of this young boy in early July, the GHF immediately responded and said, "Oh, look at this picture of this other boy that is Amir, that is at this distribution site." And that was quickly found to be fraudulent and a lie, because both of the pictures that the GHF used were pictures that I took, that I photographed. The picture of Amir and the picture of another boy that they had, that I had taken that picture of at a completely different site on a completely different day. And they claimed that, well, that was Amir, look, he's still alive. And that was not him. So they lied about that. And when they were called out on that, they kind of just left it alone. And then in September, they come out with this story showing, oh, look, we found Amir. Here's his mother. Here he is. The boy that they showcased as saying that was Amir, that they then say, oh, look, his name's not even Amir. His name is Abud. The young boy that the IDF and GHF showcased in September may very well be a young boy named Abud. I've never seen that young child. That young child was not Amir. And the story that they used to say that, the conditions surrounding it, which will be coming out more in investigations and with the ICC and the ICJ, is that if everyone recalls the hospital strike on Nasser Hospital, the double strike attack, mm-hmm. where the hospital was hit, and then when the rescuers came out to rescue people, they were hit again. So the reporter that was hit at that hospital was Mohammed Salama, who is a reporter with the Middle Eastern Eye, who was working in Gaza, who was specifically working on that case, who had the evidence, the photos, the video of Amir's dead body, which I am in possession of. And he was looking into the further of this story. He was trying to find where the bodies had been buried outside of the site. And on the 25th of August, UG Solutions personnel detained him, Mohammed Salama, and another Palestinian, and interrogated them, asking them for the footage, asking them for the videos. And then 2 days later, they get killed in that hospital strike. Intentionally struck and killed that reporter at Nasser Hospital. And then coincidentally, a week later on the 3rd of September, GHF comes out and says, oh, look, this boy's been alive the whole time. And the truth is that young boy that they showcased was not Amir. They paid that family a large sum of money and promised them evacuation from Gaza, promised them to take them to Egypt, gave them a large sum of money and promised them evacuation to go along with that story. And the child that they showcased was not Amir. It doesn't even look like him. But the attempt that they used to make it look like him were a joint operation between Mossad, the CIA, and the Department of Defense Joint Special Operations Command that had been involved in Gaza to try to put this story together to discredit me in order to cover up war crimes and crimes against humanity and the killing of a child.
And based on your observations, you estimated the Gaza death toll could be between 200,000, 300,000, far beyond official figures. What are on-the-ground indicators, like uncovered bodies that you talked about, under rubble, starvation-related deaths, and hospital surges that led to this number, Anthony? And why do you believe that indirect fatalities from famine and disease are being systematically underreported?
Well, it's well known that the casualties and the death toll from the disease and famine is not being reported. This total of this new number that the IDF has confirmed to be true is what they're counting simply as bodies that they have counted, an actual Palestinian body, Hamas or not, that they have counted and have said this is a dead body. What's not counted in that number is obviously the famine and the starvation that continue, the disease that has killed thousands, the thermobaric weapons, the Mk-82 thermobaric bomb that the United States has provided to Israel that they continue to use to this day. When a thermobaric 2,000-pound bomb drops on a building or drops on a location, anyone within a certain radius of that is obliterated, vaporized. There's nothing left. There's no body left to count. And then when you consider the thousands upon thousands of Palestinians that are still buried in 55 million tons of rubble, it is my assessment, based on seeing much of war, Mosul, Fallujah, Raqqa, Syria, Afghanistan, back in Mosul in 2018-19 in the fall of Mosul against the fight against the Islamic State, and seeing the death tolls in those situations, comparing that to what I personally witnessed in Gaza and the total destruction and what is likely left remaining of the civilian population, it is in my professional assessment from fighting in wars around the world, in 12 combat deployments, and seeing a lot of war, it is my assessment that the death toll in Gaza is likely around 500,000 to 600,000. What further corroborates that assessment for me is that this new humanitarian assistance transition area in the south that is part of the peace plan to bring all surviving Palestinians south, to concentrate them in the south, that's only being built to the capacity of 1.5 million. Well, if the population of Gaza at the time prior to the war was 2.1 to 2.2 million, and they're only anticipating a survival rate of 1.5 million to either concentrate in Gaza or to get them out of Gaza, then if you do the math, you're looking at a difference of about 500 to 600, potentially more, thousand. So it is my assessment that when the truth is finally known, the totality of the population and the casualties, that it will be much closer to 600,000 than what's being reported right now. And I think that if you look at any war throughout history, whether it was World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, wars throughout the Cold War era, that numbers of fatalities are always, not often, always underreported until the truth comes out. And when the truth comes out about the death toll in Gaza, it will be a stain on humanity.
Incredible. And Anthony, this is what I wanted to ask you, the comparison between what you've been through, what you saw in Gaza and other places where you've been. As a Green Beret with combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places as well, how did the IDF's discipline and rules of engagement in Gaza compare to U.S. forces you served with? And why did you later label it as stepping far over international laws of war?
Well, the conduct of war is governed by international law, laws of armed conflict, laws of land warfare, and more importantly, under the humanitarian law principles, specifically the protocols of the Geneva Convention, most recently signed in 1952, the fourth protocols, which Israel is a signatory to. The United States is a signatory to. The Geneva Conventions specifically dictate conduct in warfare. Targeting civilians is a war crime. Forcefully displacing the population through a war zone is a war crime. Displacing the population and then not providing them with the means of survival, food, water, medicine, shelter, is a war crime. The occupation of a territory with the intent on decimating the population is a war crime. All of these are facts. These are not opinions. So when I look at what's happening and the IDF that's conducting it, the IDF is not a disciplined military unit. They lack strong leadership. They lack moral leadership. Their objectives in Gaza are not to win a war and sue for peace. Their objectives in Gaza are the ethnic cleansing, the cultural erasure, and the complete genocide of the population. And they are executing military operations in that fashion, where there's no discrimination. Everybody is considered the enemy. There is no discernment between a mosque or a school or a hospital. Everything is considered enemy territory. And those are violations of the Geneva Convention. Those are violations of international law. So the IDF are operating knowing that. The IDF are operating in a way to where they know exactly what they are doing. It is not an accident. It is not the fog and friction of war. It is intentional. And when you look at the Israeli Defense Forces and the wars that they fight, they are at war with all of their neighbors. And they fight with no rules. They step over the line of international conduct and international standards. They strike sovereign nations without provocation. They conduct operations against civilians. They dress as doctors and go into hospitals and conduct operations. A grave violation of the Geneva Convention. So, yeah, they are not a disciplined unit. They are a renegade unit that is free to do whatever they want. And that does not make them a disciplined or good military unit. They certainly are not the most moral army in the world, that's for sure.
And you've transitioned from a 25-year military career to now a Green Party candidate for North Carolina 13th Congressional District. And you've also said that U.S. taxpayers should demand an immediate audit of the billions funneled to Israel.
My campaign is people-powered and grassroots. I take no money at all from any political action committees, from any super political action committees, from any lobbyists, from any military-industrial complex donors, any mega donors. I take no corporate money. I am running this campaign people-powered on the ground because I want to go to Congress to represent the needs of the people, not the demands of the military-industrial complex or of AIPAC or of a foreign government. And so the campaign is starting off really well, and I'm very excited. I am very confident that the Green Party will win in the primary elections in the United States in November and in certain districts that we're running in. I'm very confident that people will want me in Congress to represent them. As far as the audit piece, this is very simple to do in terms of initiating it, difficult to do in terms of getting bicameral and bipartisan support for it because of the political sensitivities around it, which in my opinion are unethical and immoral. But there should be an audit of everything that the United States has provided to Israel in weapons, in funding, in support. There must be an audit that is reportable back to the American people of how the United States government spent taxpayer dollar, whether it's to look for crime or nefarious activity or not. That simply an audit to report back to the American people that under this memorandum of understanding where we send $3.9 billion directly to Israel every year on top of all of the billions that we provide in military aid and direct funding and direct economic support, what happens with that money? How is it spent? The Americans deserve an answer. Well, that comes through an audit, and there should be no reason why any government entity should push back or not consider that they should be audited. The Department of Defense, the United States Department of Defense, should be audited. They have not been audited in the last 5+ years because of ongoing operations. They say, oh, well, we possibly can't provide the information to be audited because things are moving too rapidly. And in the past, when they've been audited, they've failed those audits. The United States of America, the people, should demand that the Department of Defense, which is now spending at a budget of 192 billion US dollars and is protracted next year to spend 1.7 trillion dollars, that department should be audited, and an answer should be given to the American people to show this is how we have spent a large portion of your tax dollars, America. And I guarantee that if we have ethical, moral lawmakers in Congress, that we can look at that budget, audit it, and find massive return on investment in taxes to the American taxpayer. Before we have to raise taxes, before we have to raise tariffs, before we have to cut funding elsewhere, we can reinvest return on investment of those tax dollars that are being spent wrongfully, illegally, unconstitutionally, in duplicity, fraud, waste, and abuse. Billions of dollars we can give back to the American people simply by an audit of the Department of Defense. And of that, I am very confident because I lived it for 25 years.
And your wife, a retired military officer, encouraged you to speak out despite the risks. How has the backlash, including threats to your family's safety, affected your decision to run for the office, to go into politics? And what protections do you advocate for whistleblowers exposing US-funded atrocities abroad?
Well, you know, much of the blowback that I received is nothing against the substantiation of my claims. There's proof, there's videos, there's photos, there's eyewitness testimony. There's eyewitness testimony from doctors that have been there. There's eyewitness testimony from me. There's eyewitness testimony from the IDF. There's the facts coming out from the IDF themselves that corroborate everything that I've said. So the pushback that I received is primarily through, well, character assassination. Well, you know, we can't refute what he has said, so we're going to try to assassinate who he is as a person. And that has failed. And so, yeah, death threats, character assassination, smearing, doxing, threats against me professionally, threats against me personally. And it's unfortunate that that is the world that we live in, to where those in power so vehemently want to hide and cover up the truth. And the truth will be known. The truth always comes out. And when it does, and as it does, people will see that they've been lied to. And I understand the risks, and I cannot sit back and see the course of our nation, of our country, being completely compelled and complicit with a foreign government in its bidding for unending war. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, soon Iran, Venezuela. All of these wars that Israel and the Israeli government have had direct influence in either starting and or drawing us into. And that won't stop unless we stop doing it. So I care about the future of our country. I care about the future generations. I care about my children. I care about all of our children in the next generations, and wanting a world to live in that is safer than that of which we left, and that is actually not a world to survive in, because the course that we are on now with endless wars, the economy, healthcare, is not a survivable world in the future. And I will do everything that I can to prevent that.
And I have to ask you this, and I don't think it's not being talked about in the media enough. So many stories you've shared, really, and you relive your traumas every time you speak about it. How did all of this impact your mental health? What coping strategies, like therapy or family support, have you really employed to process the heartbreak? You called it a heartbreak of Gaza's child casualties, especially.
Well, it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see simply on the level of humanity, but it's also heartbreaking to see in knowing that the United States government is actively participating and actively knowing in what's going on. We are not bystander. We are actively participating in this genocide. And that is heartbreaking. And there isn't a day that I don't go to sleep or wake up thinking about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, what the U.S. is also funding and underwriting in the Congo, in the Sudan, in central China, and what's happening to the Uyghur population, what's happening in our own country. these are all very disturbing and heartbreaking things. And in Gaza, particularly, when you personally witness the most innocent of us, children, innocent children, as those that are being the most affected through slaughter, through injury, through death, through the loss of their entire families. That's not a world that is comfortable to live in, to know that the world sees what's happening, and we as a world, as an entire world, cannot come together with all of the powers that be in this entire world, come together to put a stop to this. Because this is not something that the world can say we didn't know or we weren't aware. We see what's coming out of Gaza every day. 4K HD on our TVs and our smartphones and our devices. We see it every day, and it's no secret. And if we continue to allow it, what does that say about us as humanity? And that's a very scary world to live in. And it does impact me mentally and emotionally. And I just have to keep focusing on what's right, focusing on the truth, focusing on each day at a time, doing what I can, what's in my power to bring light to the situation, but to also take action to bring justice. And we're at a point to where there's much that cannot be done to change the course of history, but we should demand justice. If we do not demand justice for what we've all bear witness to, then our world is on a very dangerous course of authoritarianism around the world. And I don't think most people in this world want that.
And one last question, Anthony. What message would you deliver in Congress to active duty troopers about moral courage in the face of orders enabling oppression?
Much like the message that the Congress released with, which was partisan with the primarily or only Democrats that were part of that message, but I didn't see that as a partisan message. I saw that as the truth. It is absolutely a true statement that a United States military service member, regardless of which branch of service, enlisted or officer, have an oath to the Constitution and a legal obligation to disobey unethical, immoral, or illegal orders. And I would convey that, I would reinforce and also convey that same message. And what's unique about our military that is different than any other military in the world is that we have an officer branch and we have a non-commissioned officer branch. In the United States military, regardless of what branch you serve, as an officer, when you raise your right hand and you take that oath of service, when you enter the service, your oath is not to a president, it's not to the Congress, it's not to a political party, it's not even to the army. Your oath as a military officer is to the Constitution and the Constitution only, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. For the non-commissioned officer branch of the military, their oath is to obey the orders of the officers appointed over them and the President of the United States, who are supposed to be abiding by the Constitution. So when you have officers or non-commissioned officers who do not follow the Constitution or say yes to orders that violate that, it puts the entire service at a risk of now being in violation of the Constitution, but then becoming the tool of authoritarian rule. And I fear that our military, unless more leaders stand up and start speaking out against this, that our entire military, much like ICE has become in the United States, will become a direct tool of authoritarian oppression.
Anthony, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with me and sharing your personal story and share the story of the children of Gaza and what you witnessed. Only thing I can say is stay safe, keep speaking out, and hoping to see you again soon. Of course, much luck in your political career. Really looking forward to see what's next for you.
Thank you, and have a great day, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Toliko u Pulsu planete za ovu sedmicu. Ukoliko ste propustili ovaj razgovor, možete ga i dalje potražiti na našem sajtu newsmax.balkans.com. Mi se vidimo naredne sedmice. Ne mijenjajte kanal.